The Galactic Council Chamber was a masterpiece of alien architecture, a vast dome of shifting lights and translucent walls that pulsed with the rhythm of 1,000 conversations. Delegates of all species filled the circular hall, their forms varied, some towering with insective limbs, others small and gelatinous, still others wrapped in shimmering exoskeletal armor. The Council had ruled the known galaxy for millennia, unchallenged in their authority. They had seen empires rise and fall, had tamed worlds, subjugated civilizations, and dictated the fate of countless species. And now, before them, stood a human. The representative of Earth was unremarkable at first glance, two-legged, symmetrical, soft-skinned compared to the hardened carapaces and scaled hides of his peers. He wore a simple dark suit, devoid of embellishment, his expression unreadable. His hands rested calmly at his sides. His heartbeat, though unheard by alien ears, remained steady. No fear. No hesitation. This alone unsettled the Council. The presiding speaker, a being of flowing crystalline form, lifted its segmented limbs. Humanity of soul, your kind has disregarded the edicts of the Galactic Council. Your species has expanded beyond its allotted borders, violated the technological restrictions imposed upon you, and engaged in unsanctioned conflicts. A moment of silence followed. This will not be tolerated. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. The councillors had seen this play out before. Primitive species always resisted at first. But in the end, they submitted, as they always did. A broad, four-armed reptilian delegate leaned forward, slitted eyes narrowing. We offered your species guidance, he rumbled. Yet you refused to abide by our laws. You mistake our patience for weakness. His jaws parted in a slow, deliberate smile. That is unwise. A chittering voice from the side echoed the sentiment. Your planet is young. Your civilization, a mere flicker in time. Do you truly believe yourselves equal to the great races that have shaped this galaxy for eons? The human ambassador remained silent for a moment. Then, he exhaled softly. Not in fear, nor in frustration. It was almost amused. You misunderstand us, he said, his voice even, steady. We never sought to be equals. Some of the councillors shifted, confused by the response. The crystalline speaker flickered in irritation. Then you acknowledge your place? The human's head tilted slightly. We acknowledge reality. And the reality is this: your council assumed we were lesser. That we would accept your rule as others have. A pause. You failed to ask why we didn't? The reptilian delegate's tail flicked in annoyance. Because you are arrogant, he snapped. Like so many before you. You think your species is special. The ambassador finally moved, taking a single step forward. Though it was not an act of aggression, it sent an unmistakable ripple through the assembly. Something in the way humans moved, too precise, too fluid, disturbed many of the more rigid species. No, he said simply. Not special. Just different. The murmuring returned, louder this time. The crystalline speaker flickered again. You have one chance, human. Accept integration under the council, or face consequences. For the first time, the human's expression shifted. A faint smile, barely there. Understood. Then he turned and walked away. The council chamber was silent. The moment the doors sealed behind him, the murmurs erupted into a cacophony. They defy us openly. They do not comprehend the might of this council. Their arrogance will cost them dearly. The reptilian delegate slammed a clawed fist on the table. Enough. If they will not listen, they will be made to listen. A demonstration fleet will be dispatched immediately. Their military will crumble. Their leaders will beg. The crystalline speaker's form pulsed, considering. Yes. Show them their place. Across the vastness of space, the order was given. A fleet, vast and unchallengeable, set course for Earth. They expected surrender. They did not expect what came next. The Galactic Council's fleet emerged from slip space in perfect formation, an overwhelming display of power. Their warships, each a city of metal and energy, floated above Earth's atmosphere like silent judges passing sentence. This was not a war, this was a lesson. The Council had done this before. Countless civilizations had been shown their place in the hierarchy through a carefully measured show of force. They expected fear. They expected immediate submission. They expected humanity to kneel. They expected wrong. The first sign that something was different came not from the humans, but from their own systems. The lead battleship scanners, sophisticated beyond human technology, flickered with strange inconsistencies. The readings were off. The numbers didn't align. Entire sections of their data streams were being rewritten in real time. Then the jamming began. The fleet's secure communications, encrypted and thought to be unbreakable, went silent. No commands could be relayed. No formations could be adjusted. The admiral in command, a seasoned veteran who had crushed uprisings without lifting a claw, frowned at the sudden disruption. He was about to order an immediate diagnostic when his console flickered, then died. On every screen, across every vessel in the fleet, a single human word appeared. Noted. It was the only warning they received. Without a sound, without a single energy signature to mark its arrival, the first human ship appeared. Small compared to the leviathans of the Council fleet, it looked unarmed, non-threatening. Yet it moved in a way that was unnatural. No inertia. No drift. Just motion, precise and absolute. Then there were 2. Then 10. Then 100. The Council fleet, veterans of 1,000 conquests, hesitated. This was not how battles began. There were no transmissions, no threats, no demands. Just silence. And then humanity struck. The first kill came so fast that most of the fleet didn't realize they were under attack. One of the Council's destroyers, twice the size of the largest human craft, simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there. The next, a blinding flash of light, followed by expanding debris. No impact. No energy weapon signature. Just eradication. Panic spread through the command decks of the remaining ships. Their enemies weren't following any known tactics. They weren't launching projectiles or firing beams of light. Their ships moved too fast, too erratically, darting between lumbering battleships like sharks among whales. And the kills continued. An alien warship tried to return fire, unleashing plasma cannons capable of melting through planetary crusts. The shots found nothing but empty void. The human ships had already moved. They seemed to know where every blast would land before it was fired. Then the second phase of the attack began. One by one, the Council ships lost control, not to weapons, but to something worse. Their systems locked. Their engines died. Atmosphere vented as doors sealed and entire decks were isolated. The crew, still alive, watched helplessly as their ships were rendered useless, their own interfaces displaying nonsensical human words and symbols. Some screamed in frustration. Others in fear. The admiral, watching his fleet collapse in real time, finally understood. This wasn't just war. This was something else. Humans were not fighting them. Humans were hunting them. There was no hesitation. No wasted movement. Every strike was calculated, every kill efficient. They were treating the Council's proud fleet the way a predator treats prey, culling the weak, separating the strong, controlling the battlefield not with brute force, but with sheer precision. This was impossible. Humanity was supposed to be primitive. Their species had only recently achieved interstellar travel. They were supposed to be lesser. The Council had thought them weak because they lacked the towering warships, the ancient traditions of conquest, the rigid battle doctrines refined over millennia. And that had been the greatest mistake. Because humans had never been prey. They had been waiting. Watching. Learning. The Admiral's mind raced, desperate for an answer, a way to salvage what remained. His species had conquered worlds, crushed rebellions, survived intergalactic conflicts. But this was something else. This was slaughter. The flagship's proximity alarms screamed too late. The human vessel did not appear so much as arrive, an impossible instant transition from nothing to something. Before the Admiral could even react, his screens went black, replaced by a single live feed. A human soldier. No armor. No visible weapons. Just a man, seated in a chair, staring directly at him. Behind him, the vast void of space was calm, almost serene. Then the soldier smiled. It was not a cruel smile. Not a mocking one. Just a simple, knowing expression. The Admiral, for the first time in his long and decorated career, felt true, unshakable fear. Then the screen cut out. And his ship, the pride of the Council's navy, went dark. The battle had ended before the Council fleet understood what had happened. Of the once mighty armada sent to subjugate Earth, only a handful of ships remained operational. The rest were wreckage drifting lifeless in the void, their crews either captured or left to the mercy of the cold abyss. The survivors, locked behind reinforced bulkheads, waited for what would come next. None dared to speak. Across the command decks of the surviving vessels, officers sat frozen as their screens displayed fragmented data, enemy movement patterns that defied every model, systems failures with no discernible cause, entire sections of their ships taken offline without so much as an alert. The reality was undeniable. Humanity had not just fought back. They had controlled every aspect of the engagement. And now, the silence was worse than the attack itself. The captives were taken without resistance. They expected interrogation, brutality, perhaps the kind of cruelty the Council had inflicted on countless civilizations before. Instead, they were met with something far more terrifying: understanding. A captured officer, a veteran of planetary campaigns, sat alone in a holding cell aboard a human warship. The walls were smooth, the air cold. He had expected shackles, confinement fields, perhaps even physical torment. But there was nothing. The door opened, and a single human stepped inside, unarmed. The officer tensed, ready for whatever psychological warfare this species had prepared. The human simply pulled up a chair and sat. For a long moment neither spoke. Then the human exhaled slowly, studying the officer with an expression that was unreadable. Not anger. Not hatred. Just quiet observation. Finally, the human leaned forward, resting his arms on his knees. "You thought we were like you," he said. The officer's jaw tightened. He refused to respond. "You assumed we'd fall in line. That we'd break like every species before us. That fear would control us." The human's voice remained calm. "But you never stopped to ask what fear means to us." The officer's mind raced through his training, the strategies drilled into him over decades of service. He had been taught the psychology of countless species, how to exploit their fears, how to break their resolve. Fear of pain, fear of loss, fear of destruction. All species feared something. It was the universal constant. But something about the way the human spoke sent a cold wave through him. "You never considered," the human continued, "that we might not fear what you fear." The officer's hands curled into fists. "All species fear annihilation." A slow shake of the head. "No," the human said softly. "You do. Your kind, your council. You fear destruction because you believe survival is the ultimate victory." He leaned back slightly. "That's where we're different." The officer clenched his teeth. "And what do you fear?" The human smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Wasting potential." For the first time, the officer faltered. "You see," the human continued, "we come from a place where survival was never guaranteed. Our ancestors didn't evolve in the safety of vast hives or communal intelligence networks. We didn't inherit the genetic advantages of engineered perfection. We were weak, slow, fragile." His eyes darkened. "And yet we endured. We adapted. Not because we were the strongest, but because we refused to accept anything less than domination over our environment." The words settled like a weight in the officer's chest. "You thought this was war," the human said. "It wasn't. War is what happens when two forces fight for dominance. This was something else." His gaze sharpened. "This was an ecosystem correcting itself." The officer swallowed. "You're saying, what?" The human stood. Predators don't fight wars with prey. They hunt them. The officer felt something deep in his core, something alien, something he had never experienced before. He had known fear, had studied it, had used it against others. But this was different. This was the knowledge that everything he had believed about the balance of power in the galaxy had been a lie. That humanity was not some anomaly in need of correction. That they were not another species to be molded into the Council's order. They were the ones who decided what order meant. The door opened behind the human. The officer expected more threats, more taunts. Instead, he received a single, final statement. "We don't fight to win," the human said. "We fight to make sure you never want to fight us again." And then, he was alone. The Galactic Council's remaining forces retreated, battered and humiliated. The remnants of their once mighty fleet limped back to the core worlds, their command shattered, their unity fractured. Whispers spread through the ranks of their military, through the halls of their leadership, through the planets that had once believed the Council's power was absolute. The war had lasted hours. The defeat had been total. There was no announcement from Earth. No grand declaration of victory. No demands. Humanity simply waited. And that silence was what truly broke the Council. The ruling members convened in secrecy, their voices hushed, their forms hunched with unease. Fear crept into the conversations, something they had never experienced at this scale. The reality was undeniable. Humanity had made their decision, and the Council no longer had control over it. Their choices, once infinite, had been reduced to one: surrender or be erased. Yet even now, arrogance lingered. Some still clung to the old ways, convinced that a final, desperate strike could reclaim their dominance. A direct assault on Earth, one last show of force, an all-or-nothing gamble. Resources were pooled, remaining warships retrofitted with experimental weaponry, mercenary factions bribed into suicidal loyalty. Every strategy was calculated, every risk measured. This would be the deciding move. But when their ships arrived at the Sol system, humanity was already waiting. They had expected orbital defenses, planetary shields, an armada prepared for a drawn-out war. What they found instead was something worse. There was no battle. No resistance. No sign of defensive formations or last stands. The ships they had sent forward did not report back. The warships they had relied on for their final assault simply vanished. Entire formations disappeared from their instruments without a trace. The few that managed to flee returned with crews too shaken to speak. The pilots who had dared approach Earth's orbit could only whisper the same chilling truth. The humans had taken them. Not destroyed. Not crippled. Just taken. The Council's command broke apart. Panic turned to accusations, accusations turned to betrayals. Internal factions that had once stood united under the illusion of authority fractured overnight. Some worlds cut ties completely, withdrawing their fleets in the hope that humanity's wrath would not follow them. Others surrendered outright, sending transmissions to Earth that went unanswered. And then the final message came. A single human ship arrived at the Council's homeworld, unarmed, unescorted. It descended through planetary defenses that did not fire, past trembling fleets that did not move, until it hovered above the grand chamber where the rulers of the galaxy had once dictated the fate of entire civilizations. The doors opened, and a single human stepped forward. There was no demand for surrender. No threats, no ultimatums. Just a statement, spoken without cruelty, without malice, but with absolute certainty. This was never a war. This was a lesson. The Council, once the masters of the stars, had learned what it meant to stand before something greater. The collapse of the Galactic Council was not sudden. It did not come from a decisive blow, nor from the destruction of their worlds. It came from something far worse: irrelevance. The illusion of their power had been shattered. At first, they attempted to rebuild, to reassert dominance over the fractured remains of their empire. They called for unity, for resistance, for one last attempt to remind the galaxy why they had ruled for millennia. But the calls went unanswered. Their authority had been based on fear, on the belief that no species could defy them and survive. Humanity had disproven that in mere hours. The moment fear was gone, so was their rule. Former allies turned inward, prioritizing their own survival over loyalty. Entire sectors declared independence. Some planets purged all symbols of the Council, erasing their presence as if they had never existed. Others sought out humanity, not as conquerors, but as something greater, a force beyond reckoning, one that had reshaped the very laws of power. Yet humanity did not claim their throne. They did not march across the stars, seizing territory or enforcing rule. They remained distant, watching, waiting, letting the weight of what had happened settle across the galaxy. The silence was deafening. And that silence was not peace. It was a reminder. Across the core worlds, those who had once been the architects of dominance now lived in fear of the unknown. What were the humans planning? Would they strike again? Would they erase what was left of the Council? They had shown restraint, but was that mercy, or patience? No answer came. The paranoia grew. The old powers, desperate for control, turned on each other in their confusion. Assassinations, betrayals, and silent coups became commonplace as those who once dictated the fate of others struggled to secure their own. The Council's remnants became ghosts, lingering in the shadows of a world they no longer controlled. And humanity? They simply continued as they always had. They returned to their worlds, to their own expansion, their own advancements. They did not demand tribute. They did not claim the throne that had been left vacant. They had never wanted it. They had never needed it. What they had done was enough. The galaxy now understood. There were no more fleets sent against Earth. No more threats, no more ultimatums. The lesson had been learned, written in the silent wreckage of warships that would never rise again. It was not humanity that had changed. It was everything else. And the galaxy would never forget.